Evelyn Tran had always dreamed of choosing her own path. She grew up in San Francisco, the daughter of a wealthy Vietnamese-American real estate mogul. Victor Tran. From the outside, her life sparkled with privileged designer clothes, a penthouse overlooking the bay, private schools filled with children of CEOs and politicians. But beneath the glitter, her life was carefully scripted by her parents, each step a rehearsal for the role they expected her to play. Victor Tran was not a man of compromises. He had built his empire from nothing, clawing his way out of poverty with ruthless determination. His philosophy was simple: family came first, but family must also serve the empire. And now, as age crept into his bones, he was determined that Evelyn would secure the dynasty's future. Evelyn was 26 when her father announced her engagement. She was not consulted, only informed. The groom-to-be was Daniel Whitmore, the heir to Whitmore Capital, a financial conglomerate whose influence stretched from Wall Street to Silicon Valley. Their families had been circling each other for years, two predators deciding whether to merge or devour. This marriage was the chosen path, a union of wealth, power, and prestige. Evelyn met Daniel only once, at a gala in Manhattan. He had been polite, reserved, and impossibly perfect in the tailored way that men groomed for legacy often were. She remembered his firm handshake, his practiced smile, the glint of calculation in his eyes. There had been no spark, no warmth, only the sense that he was as trapped as she was. When she protested, her mother, Grace, silenced her with a single sentence. Love is a luxury, Evelyn. Security is survival. Those words lingered like chains around her heart. She wanted to scream that security meant nothing without happiness, that marriage should be about companionship, not contracts. But her father's stern gaze reminded her that defiance had consequences. The Tran fortune had strings attached, and she was one of them. The engagement dinner took place at the Whitmore residence in Pacific Heights. The home was an austere mansion with white columns and a view of the Golden Gate that made guests speak in whispers. Evelyn wore a champagne silk dress her mother had chosen. Her hair was pinned into a glossy knot that felt more like a seal than a style. Daniel stood by the balcony as though the horizon were a spreadsheet. He looked immaculate in a charcoal suit, the kind of man who appeared pressed even when he breathed. Congratulations, said a woman with a diamond brooch that could have paid a year's rent in half of the city. Her smile was thin and opportunistic, like a key sliding into a lock. Evelyn nodded and thanked her. She felt like a museum piece on loan. Victor tapped his glass. Family and partners, he began. Tonight is more than a celebration. It is a commitment to the stability of our two houses. The Trans and the Whitmores will thrive together. His voice filled the room like an announcement at an airport. Final. Inarguable. After dinner, Daniel finally approached Evelyn. Can we talk outside? He asked, already moving toward the garden. They walked past clipped hedges and marble benches that had never known the weight of real sorrow. A soft fog had rolled in, wrapping the manicured roses like gauze. I know this is not what you wanted, he said. His tone was measured, as if he were soothing a volatile market. Evelyn glanced at him. Did you want it? She asked. He hesitated. My father thinks it is prudent. My board thinks it is brilliant. Prudence and brilliance do not leave much room for preference. Do you believe in love? She asked. Daniel considered this like a complicated derivative. I believe in cooperation, he said. Sometimes love shows up. Sometimes it does not. Cooperation, however, is measurable. She laughed, not because it was funny, but because she was terrified that this was her future. A ledger balanced with human hearts. Look, Daniel added, softening. I am not your enemy. We can negotiate terms. If we have to do this, we can at least decide what it looks like. What are your terms? She asked, crossing her arms. No public scenes, he said. No infidelity scandals. You maintain your independence in your work. I maintain mine. We present stability. If in 2 years we both hate this, we reevaluate. I will protect you from my father's worst instincts if you help me manage your father's. The fog gathered at their ankles like a restless cat. Evelyn stared at the glowing city below. Somewhere out there, people were choosing each other without an audience. Somewhere, no one was counting the value of a kiss. I want a clause, she said. I want 1 week before the wedding to go anywhere I choose. Alone. No bodyguards. No surveillance. No meetings. Consider it a severance package for my old life. Daniel weighed this. That will upset them, he said. That is the point. She replied. He nodded, a small spark of respect lighting his eyes. Then we have a deal, he said. They shook hands like partners. It was the warmest moment of the night. The next morning, Evelyn arrived at Tran Holdings in a navy blazer and sneakers. The sneakers were her rebellion. The receptionist straightened as Evelyn crossed the marble floor. Heads turned in glass-walled conference rooms. An intern whispered, "That is her," as if she were a headline. Her father's office felt like a throne room built by accountants. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Desk the size of a dining table. A framed photo of a small, wooden boat from a long-ago life. He rose, wearing a tie the color of victory. "Sit," Victor said. He slid a leather folder toward her. Inside were documents that smelled faintly of ink and inevitability. Trusts. Shares. Prenuptial terms? Civic commitments crafted by lawyers who treated charity like a chess move. "I want you to sign," he said. "This ensures your future. It secures the family legacy. You will thank me when you have children." Evelyn kept her hands in her lap. "What if I never want children?" she asked. Victor's face did not change, but the air did. "You will," he said, "because we do not break the line." He spoke of the village he had left in the Mekong Delta. He spoke of hunger, of humiliation, of working kitchens and hoarding tips to buy English lessons. He spoke of racism and men who would not take his handshake. He spoke of nights when the fog felt like a wall. He spoke as if pain were a currency that must yield interest. "I survived to give you choices," he said. "But choices must be useful. Sentiment is a luxury we pay for with regret. I want a week before the wedding," she said. "Non-negotiable. I will be safe. I will return." Victor's jaw met his pride. He measured the request as if it were a loan with a risky rate. 3 days? He said. "A week?" She replied. Silence stretched. Grace, who had been listening from the doorway, stepped in. "Let her have the week," she said softly. "She will come back." Victor looked at his wife, then at his daughter, then at the boat in the photo. "Fine," he said. "But there will be conditions. You will tell us where you go. You will answer calls. And you will return on the 8th morning." He held out a pen. She signed, and the pen felt heavier than it should. Evelyn's best friend, Talia, ran a community arts nonprofit in the Mission. They had met in a lecture on urban ethics at Stanford and become inseparable in the way opposites attract. Talia rented an apartment above a bakery that woke the street at dawn. Her walls were hung with works by artists who sometimes paid rent in canvases. Her refrigerator contained 3 kinds of hot sauce and an old apple. "Are you going to marry him?" Talia asked, handing Evelyn a mug of tea. Evelyn sat on the window ledge and watched a man teach his daughter to ride a bike. "Probably," she said. The word tasted like a swallowed secret. Talia leaned against the counter. "You do not have to," she said. "I know a lawyer who specializes in high-stakes runaways. We can put you on a bus to anywhere. We can dye your hair in the sink and call you Eve Martinez. It will be very dramatic." Evelyn smiled. "Thank you for the vision," she said. "But I made a deal. And maybe a deal can be a bridge, not a prison." Talia studied. "Then take the week," she said. "Take it like oxygen. Where will you go?" "I do not know yet." Evelyn said. "Maybe somewhere no one speaks in balance sheets. Maybe somewhere where the night is loud and honest." "New Orleans," Talia said immediately. "Jazz. Big nits. Ghosts. Everyone minds their business until they do not. It is perfect." Evelyn laughed. "The New Orleans," she said. She felt a thrill of reckless hope. "If I get married, my last week as myself will belong to me. At SVO." She wore jeans and a hoodie and felt almost invisible. She carried a small suitcase and a book she would not read. On the plane, a baby cried 2 rows back and an elderly man snored like an old engine. The flight attendant brought her ginger ale and asked if she was traveling for business or pleasure. Rebellion? Evelyn said, and the woman grinned as if she understood. She landed at midnight and stepped into humidity that kissed her skin like a welcome. The cab driver played a brass band record that sounded like ladder with a trumpet. The hotel was a creaky building with a blue door and friendly ghosts. Her room smelled of lemon oil and stories. She slept with the window cracked open and dreamed of empty maps. In the morning, she watched a man on a corner play the trumpet with his eyes closed. She watched a woman braid a child's hair on a stoop while telling a story that made the child giggle. She ate a powdered bagnet and did not brush the sugar off her shirt. She felt the edges of her life soften. By afternoon, she found a tiny cafe with a piano that needed tuning and a chalkboard menu that listed 3 sandwiches and an apology. The barista was a man in his early 30s with dark curls and hands that had built things. His name tag read Miles, but it had been printed crooked, as if it refused to cooperate. He made her a café au lait and set it down with a careful thunk. First time in town? He asked. She said. Looks good on you. He replied. The line moved. Her heart did a small, ridiculous dance. She came back the next day. Miles remembered her order. He had a dry wit and a softness in his eyes that made people confess things. He was the kind of person who listened like a door left open. He asked no unnecessary questions. What do you do? He finally asked. I inherit? She said. That sounds exhausting. He replied. It is. She said. He nodded as if exhaustion were a language he spoke. On the 3rd day, a summer storm rolled in with drama, the sky bruising into a purple that felt almost theatrical. Miles closed the shop early and offered Evelyn a spare umbrella that had lost a rib. You will have to lean into the wind, he said. I have been doing that my whole life. She replied. They walked to the river. Rain wrinkled the water. The city smelled like rain and fried shrimp and memory. They found cover under a balcony draped in ferns. Miles told her he had once studied architecture but left school when his father got sick. He told her he kept meaning to go back but somehow never did. He told her he built tables in his garage and sold them to people who could smell the difference between veneer and truth. And you? He asked. What do you want? The question was so clean it startled her. No one had asked her that without an invoice attached. I want to be useful to something I choose, she said. I want to be loved without a contract. I want to wake up and not need permission to be myself. He considered this. Seems reasonable, he said. Seems expensive, she replied. They laughed because it hurt. Her phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. Everything okay? It read. She typed back. How's the fog? He responded with a photo of the bridge swallowed by gray. Classic. He wrote. She added a laughing emoji and put the phone away. Boyfriend? Miles asked. Sort of, she said. Sort of is a dangerous neighborhood. He replied. It is. She agreed. They walked until the rain turned into a whisper. When they parted at the cafe, Miles said, Tomorrow, there is a jam at the club on Frenchman. You should go. It is loud and sweaty and unself-conscious. She said she would. She did not ask if he would be there. She already knew. The band was all stomp and grin. The trumpet player's cheeks ballooning like he might lift the roof with breath alone. Evelyn stood near the back, letting the rhythm knead the knots she carried. Miles appeared beside her, not surprised to see her. Not relieved, just quietly glad. He wore a white shirt with sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing a small scar on his forearm like a note in a margin. They shouted to be heard. What is your favorite sound? He asked. Someone I love laughing in a room I chose, she said. He grinned. That is very specific. He replied. I had practice, she said. They danced badly and with sincerity. He smelled like soap and sawdust. For a few songs, she forgot her name had a portfolio. For a few songs, she remembered her body belonged to her. When they stepped outside for air, the night was a damp velvet. Street vendors shouted. A stray cat threaded the crowd like a rumor. Miles leaned against the wall and studied her. You look like a person trying on new weather, he said. She exhaled a laugh. I have to go back in 2 days, she said. He nodded. Of course you do, he said. Will you be okay? She looked past him to the neon. I do know, she said. He did not offer solutions. He offered presents. It was enough. On the last morning, she walked the quarter at dawn. A street cleaner traced slow. What circles? A woman hosed down a sidewalk like prayer. She bought coffee from a booth that steamed like a ship. She wrote a postcard to Talia that said, I remembered who I am. I am packing her with me. At the fifth, Miles handed her a small, sanded piece of wood. It was a coaster made from cypress, the grain shaped like a fingerprint. Proof you were here, he said. Thank you, she replied. Will you visit again? He asked. I do know, she said. Then take this, he said, placing a pencil on the counter. Write me a reason to expect you. She laughed, wrote her email on the back of a receipt, and left it like a tip. On the flight home, she stared at clouds that looked like mountains. Migrations. Apologies. She thought of Daniel's careful decency. She thought of her father Espote. She thought of Miles Escar and the way he said reasonable like a man who knew the price of wood and worry. She fell asleep and dreamed she was walking across a river made of brass. San Francisco felt colder than she remembered. The city had its arms crossed. Evelyn arrived at the rehearsal dinner in a red dress that made a statement without needing an exclamation mark. Daniel approached her with uncharacteristic urgency. You vanished, he said, though his voice held no accusation. I honored our deal. She replied. He studied her. You look different, he said. I feel different. She answered. Good. He said so. They stood beside a floral arrangement the size of an apology. Did you meet someone? He asked. She could have lied. Instead, she said, by myself. He exhaled. A small surrender. He said. He lifted his glass. To ourselves. He murmured. They clinked as if baptizing a fragile truth. Later, in the chaos of seating charts and speeches, Daniel's father cornered her. Graham Whitmore had the posture of entitlement and the charm of a credit card without a limit. Evelyn, he said, we are thrilled to welcome you. This alliance will steady the market's view of our enterprises. Our families will be stronger together. I assume your father made the terms clear. I understand, she said politely. I hope you understand something else. Graham replied, lowering his voice. My son requires stability. He has had enough of drama and unpredictability. We expect you to support him like an asset supports a portfolio. The words were a velvet thread. She smiled the way women learn to smile when men say things that sound like love but smell like power. Of course, she said. She walked away before the smile melted. 2 days before the wedding, news broke that Whitmore Capital was under quiet investigation for market manipulation. Anonymous sources. Whispers about derivatives engineered to sink a competitor. Graham shrugged it off as routine scrutiny. Daniel's jaw tightened. A small earthquake. Victor was incandescent with controlled rage. He summoned Evelyn into his office and spoke like a man addressing a boardroom fire. We proceed, he said. Any sign of fear will be interpreted as weakness. Weakness invites predators. We are not prey. Evelyn listened. Are we partners or shields? She asked. Victor stared at her. Sometimes partnership is the most efficient shield, he said. Do not mix sentiment with strategy. He had a way of turning the human heart into a spreadsheet and calling it wisdom. That night, Daniel called her. Do you want to postpone? He asked. She heard exhaustion at the edges of his voice. She pictured him in his apartment. Jacket off? Tie loose? A man trained to compete now trying to confess. What do you want? She asked. I want not to be my father, he said. But I do not know how to stop being the son of a man like that. She closed her eyes. I will marry you, she said. But I want to be your shield. I will be your mirror. We do this. We do it honestly. If that honesty breaks us, will it? Agreed. Silence. Then a breath. Agreed, he said. The wedding took place in a museum courtyard filled with white flowers like a thread of snow. A string quartet played a song that had been focus grouped for elegance. Grace adjusted Evelyn's veil with hands that shook but not from fear. "I wanted a different life for you," Grace whispered. "I wanted choices without prices. But I was chosen by a man who priced everything. I chose him anyway. I hope you understand someday." Evelyn kissed her mother's cheek. "I already," she said. She walked down the aisle on a carpet that felt like a runway into a climate she could not predict. Daniel looked at her as if she were the risk he had decided to take on purpose. The officiant spoke of contract and covenant, past and future, families and foundations. When it was time for vows, Daniel surprised her. "I was raised to optimize outcomes," he said. "To calculate risk. To confuse caution with character. I do not know if I believe in destiny, but I believe in you telling me the truth, even when it costs me. I promise to listen, especially when it dents my pride. I promise not to ask you to shrink so I can feel tall. I will be your partner, not your warden. If we will fail honestly. If we succeed, it will be because we chose to, not because we were forced." Evelyn felt the crowd lean in. She lifted her own vow. "I was raised to carry a legacy like a jewel and a burden," she said. "I was taught to trade dreams for stability and call it maturity. I promise to show up as myself, even on days when that self is inconvenient. I promise to bring the person I found when no one was watching. I will not be a silence in your life. I will be a voice. I will be a door that opens, not a wall. If I go missing, I will tell you where I went. If I want to stay, I will choose you every day." They exchanged rings. Cameras clicked like insects. Applause rose like a tide. Deal was sealed. A marriage began. At the reception, Talia hugged Evelyn so hard the corset protested. "You did it," Talia said. "You did not disappear." Evelyn laughed. "Not yet," she said. Miles did not appear at the party because this was not that kind of story. But somewhere, a trumpet played a blue note that threaded the night like a promise. Graham shook hands with senators and venture capitalists. He kissed cheeks and smiled for cameras and spoke into microphones about the American story. Victor stood beside him like a mountain with manners. Daniel and Evelyn danced once for show, and then escaped to a balcony where the night smelled like eucalyptus and money. "How long do you think before the investigation either evaporates or explodes?" she asked. "Weeks," he said. "Maybe months. I pushed back when I could, but I did not push back hard enough. We will see this through," she said. "And if we continue, we won't pretend. Deal?" He nodded, and for a moment the balcony felt like a truce. 3 months into their marriage, a trove of emails leaked. They showed a Whitmore executive coordinating a campaign to destabilize a rival. Graham denied knowledge. The executive resigned with a golden parachute that opened like a condemnation. Protests erupted outside Whitmore headquarters. Stock dipped and then plummeted like a stone pretending to be a bird. Inside the storm, Daniel moved with quiet fury. He fired people who had been untouchable. He opened the books to the feds. He testified behind closed doors and then in front of cameras. He did not flinch, but when he came home at night, he looked like a man who had been used as a shield and decided instead to be a sword. Evelyn sat with him at the kitchen table and listened. She brewed tea that went cold. She said little and meant much. "One night," he asked, "do you regret this?" She shook her head. "I regret what shaped us," she said. "Not that we found each other inside it." He placed his hand on the coaster she would brought back from New Orleans. He traced the grain as if reading a map. "Tell me about the cafe," he said. So she did. She told him about the chalkboard menu and the crook named Tag and the man who made wood tell the truth. He listened without jealousy. He listened like a man learning there are many ways to be brave. Graham called a meeting. He wanted a united front. He wanted controlled messaging. He wanted his son to stop apologizing and start winning. Daniel said. Evelyn sat in the corner and watched two versions of a dynasty collide. "You will destroy our name." Graham hissed. "I will remake it." Daniel said. In daylight, Graham turned to Evelyn as if she were leverage. "Tell him," he demanded. "Tell him we cannot afford this moral theater." Evelyn met his eyes and saw the fear beneath the swagger. She thought of her father as boat. She thought of her mother's trembling hands at the veil. She thought of a city that danced under storms. I want to tell him to be smaller, she said. I want to tell him to be a man you can use. Graham's lip curled. You are a mistake, he said. An expensive one. Daniel stood. We done, he said. He took Evelyn's hand and left. Sometimes leaving is how you stay loyal to yourself. The next months were a long corridor of headlines. Investigations concluded with finds that were enormous to ordinary people and a rounding error to empires. Graham's influence sagged like a roof after too much rain. He lost his board seat. He kept his money. Because that is how stories like this often go. Daniel became the interim CEO. He imposed limits that cost friends their yachts. He rebuilt compliance like a spine. He paid severance to employees blindsided by wealthy men's appetites. He spoke to interns and asked their names. He stared down cameras and did not promise redemption. Only work. At home, Evelyn returned to Tran Holdings with new conditions. She proposed a fund for affordable housing built with respect, not press releases. Victor resisted like an old tree. Then he visited a site where a building rose on the bones of a parking lot. He watched families tour model units with the awe of people touching a possibility. He signed the check. He said nothing. But he began attending the meetings and asking questions that mattered. Grace invited Evelyn to lunch and brought an envelope. Inside was the photo of the boat. Your father keeps this like a compass, she said. I think it should be yours for a while. When you look at it, remember where we started. Remember where you can choose to go. Evelyn pressed the photo to her chest and felt the past steady her. An email arrived from Miles. Was short. Built a table from a down cypress. It has a knot shaped like a city. Hope you are well. If you are not, I hope you have someone who knows how to hold the heavy ends. She stared at the screen and felt the ache of an unloved life that was not a tragedy, only a path unchosen. She wrote back. Thank you for the coaster. It sits on our table and reminds me that grain is a record of pressure survived. I am well enough. Sometimes I am not. But I am honest. And I'm not alone. He replied with a photo of the table. It was beautiful in the way practical things are when someone loves them. He said if she ever needed somewhere to sit that did not belong to an empire, there would be a seat. She closed her laptop and breathed. She told Daniel about the message. He smiled. I am glad you have a place in the world that owes you nothing, he said. Keep it. A year passed. Then another. Their marriage was not a romance novel. It was a collaboration, patient and stubborn. They argued about schedules, about public statements, about whether a weekend in Tahoe counted as rest. They learned each other's language. They learned that apologies were currency that only worked if backed by action. They learned to laugh at the absurdity of fundraisers where hope was auctioned off between courses. On their second anniversary, they returned to New Orleans. They walked past the Blue Door Hotel and the cafe with the piano that still needed tuning. Miles waved from behind the counter. Time had left a few silver threads in his hair. He hugged Evelyn like a friend. A ghost? He shook Daniel's hand and meant it. They sat at a small table with a wobbly leg and told stories about the years that had happened without them. No sparks. No triangles sharpened. Only lives acknowledged each other and bowed. When they left, Miles handed Daniel a small piece of cypress. For your desk? He said. So you remember to build what you can live with. Daniel tucked it into his pocket like a talisman. That night, they stood by the river. The water moved with its old confidence. A band played down the block. Evelyn leaned into Daniel and felt the steady rise and fall of a man learning how to breathe in his own house. Do you ever wonder about the road not taken? He asked. I walk that road sometimes, she said. In mud. I wave to the trees. Then I come home. He nodded. I do not know if I believe in soulmates, he said. I believe in workmates of the heart. She smiled. Then let us keep working, she said. Victor retired slowly, like a tide withdrawing in careful inches. He named Evelyn as his successor with a speech that made no mention of boats or fear. Only stewardship? In private, he handed her the fountain pen she had used to sign her week away. I was wrong about some things, he said. Not about survival, but about the cost of it. I thought safety meant silence. You taught me that safety sometimes comes from the loud truth. Take care of our name. But take care of your name, too. She hugged him. He smelled like aftershave and eucalyptus, and the kind of relief that arrives with surrender. The Affordable Housing Fund broke ground on a building with a courtyard designed for gatherings that were not weddings. Children chalked flowers on the new sidewalks. A grandmother hung wind chimes from a balcony. Evelyn stood in the courtyard and felt a kind of love that had nothing to do with romance and everything to do with belonging. At Whitmore, Daniel stepped down to a role that paid less and cost less of his soul. He mentored people who had learned to measure themselves in quarterly returns. He bought a second-hand lathe and made bowls on weekends. The Cypress talisman sat on his desk like a compass that did not need north to be useful. They did not have children right away. They were asked about it at dinners and on morning shows by hosts who thought they were friendly. Sometimes they said, "Not yet." Sometimes they said, "Maybe never." Sometimes they said nothing and let the silence be a boundary. Eventually, they chose to foster a teenager named Kai who knew more about courage than most adults in rooms with chandeliers. Kai moved into their guest room and filled the house with sneakers and music and a fierce skepticism about rich people that kept everyone honest. They learned a new language again. They learned that love is something you do, not something you inherit. On an ordinary Tuesday, Evelyn found the old leather folder at the back of a drawer. She opened it and saw the prenuptial clauses and the list of expectations that once felt like bars. She read the line about marriage securing assets as if it were a joke told by a nervous god. Daniel came in with sawdust on his sleeve. He looked at the folder and winced. "Remember when we thought paper could keep us safe?" he said. She nodded. "Paper can keep track," she said. "But can it keep faith? That lives in the daily." They walked to the balcony and watched the fog hesitate above the bay like an undecided guest. Somewhere in the city, a boy learned to ride a bike and a woman signed a lease with a key that felt like a crown. Somewhere, a man chose to tell the truth even though it cost him his father's approval. Somewhere, a cafe chalked the word sorry next to soup and made room for a piano to be out of tune and still perfect. Evelyn leaned her head on Daniel's shoulder. "We did not break the line," she said. "We redrew." Daniel kissed her temple. "We made a new map," he said. "Made of wood grain and weather and the way your voice sounds when you say my name. Made of the week you took and the years we chose. Made of the people we became when we stopped performing for ghosts." She smiled and felt the coaster under her palm, warm from the sun that had finally pushed through. "Reasonable," she whispered, and he laughed. They stood there while the city lit itself, not like a celebration, but like a promise kept. They had inherited many things. Money. Expectations. Names that opened doors and closed hearts. But what they guarded most carefully was the contract they wrote every morning with coffee and conversation and the decision to be kind. Not a contract drawn by lawyers. Not a merger signed by families who mistook wealth for weather. A small, stubborn, daily contract to hearts. Revocable only by neglect. Renewed by courage. Witnessed by no one but the people who lived inside it. Evelyn reads architectural plans for a community center where teenagers can record music and learn to fix bikes. She signs checks and attends meetings that do not end with champagne. She takes calls from Kai's teachers and learns the names of his friends and how they like their eggs. She visits her parents on Sundays and brings mangoes and patience. She tells her father about the day's wins and losses, and sometimes he listens with his eyes closed, because history is heavy. Daniel sands a bowl until it feels like a question answered. He invests in companies that pay in turns and recycle their promises. He walks to work when the fog is friendly. He writes emails to his younger self and never sends them. He keeps the cypress talisman on his desk and touches it before difficult meetings as if asking the tree to remember him. Sometimes they return to New Orleans. Sometimes they do not. Miles writes once a year. He tells them the cafe bought a second piano and neither is in tune, which is now a house rule. He tells them he built a table that looks like a river paused. He does not ask questions he has no right to ask. They reply with photos of bowls and buildings and a teenager who is learning to trust the ground. The world remains itself. Unfair. Loud. Ridiculous. Beautiful. Empires still rise and misbehave. Boats still leave villages in the dark. Some marriages still feel like mergers. But in a pentos that learned how to be a home, two people keep their daily contract. They remember that love is not a commodity but a craft. They remember that inheritance can be rewritten. They remember that the week she claimed for herself did not end. It expanded. It stretched into a life where the terms and conditions finally served the promises. They keep choosing. They keep showing up. They keep the door open. They keep the map honest. And when the fog returns, as it always does, they do not wait for the sun to certify their courage. They walk into it together. They hold the heavy ends. They lean into the wind. They find their way by touch. And the city holds them like a witness who knows the difference between a contract signed in ink and a promise learned by heart.